When we're talking about, the power of words, for me, when I was drinking, it was very much my words that were keeping me stuck. I mean, a whole lot of other stuff as well. I mean, there's no doubt about, lots of things were kind of going on in my head. But the thing that was most often going on in my head was this inner dialogue, which was constant. And it was all about control and failure. Why can't you just have this one? Why can't you keep to your promises? You're so weak. You're a failure. You're out of control. You're always going to be like this. That's the other thing that kind of, this is you now, this is you. And, it just keeps you stuck, because ultimately, that voice is something that you come to believe implicitly. And the words that it's telling you, the words that you're saying to yourself are so cruel, but you start to believe them, because
You do.
in this self-fulfilling prophecy kind of way,
Yes.
they become true. Because you're so deflated, you're so rubbish, you're a failure, you're so deflated, you're so down, it's such an uncomfortable realization that for those of us who seek comfort in drink, it's a sort of self-perpetuating cycle. And so the negativity, and I suppose that's specifically what we're talking about there, the sort of the negativity, and that negative voice is a huge factor. And of course it doesn't just therefore shape our habit, the continuation of the habit, but it shapes your very identity. This is who I am.
I can feel that so much and relate to that. And I think about that in terms of the relationship with alcohol and the addictive tendencies towards keep moving towards the thing that makes you feel like that makes you behave like that. And then the shameful self-talk that reaffirms that. And I think this is known as the Gollum effect. We have the Pygmalion effect, which is just the positive self-fulfilling prophecy. And then we have the Gollum effect, which is the negative self-fulfilling prophecy, where we believe something about ourselves, and so therefore we then behave in that way. That then gets mirrored in our environment, and then the environment reflects that back and firms and seals the belief, which is the negative belief. And I can relate to that so much when you say that. And it's shame, right?
Oh, it is. I mean, you're constantly shaming yourself, and you're criticizing yourself. I mean, your inner critic goes into hyperdrive. It's the only voice that ends up banging around your head, on a daily basis, in the middle of the night when you've done it again, all that sort of stuff. Beration, constant. I didn't know it had a name, Gollum effect. I like that. Conjures up an immediate image. It makes a lot of sense to me, that does. But and obviously with all of that, as you're wearing yourself down through your own words and your own narrative, you are beginning to feel a deep sense of shame. And then the shame becomes the other big thing that keeps you stuck. Because of course I was saying, there's lots of things that keep you stuck. I mean, your words is definitely one of them. Your words creates a great sense of shame in who you are and in your behavior. Remember, this sort of identity, your crap, basically. You can't even do this.
Yes.
What's become of you? All this really degrading kind of self-talk. And then you just start saying, you know what? I am rubbish. I am crap. I am nothing. And the shame in that is immense. And of course, because of all of this conversation, it's going on in your head. It's not being shared. It's not out in the open where shame can be dissipated in any way, shape, or form. It's all in this kind of Gollum effect of self-perpetuating negativity. And it just drives you deeper and deeper into that sense of isolation, which is what shame does. I mean, that's it. Shame is isolation, and shame is thinking that it's just you. And, even though in your heart of hearts you might think, well, other people have a similar problem, you think, well, all those other people who've got a similar problem are losers like you. It's like, but it's awful. It's awful.
I totally hear that. I'm just thinking back on the Sundays in particular.
Yeah.
When you're hungover, this is exacerbated tenfold, this internal voice, right? This negative voice. I remember looking in the mirror and saying, "You're disgusting."
Yeah.
Because of how I looked, and I hadn't slept, and I was just hanging. and you know, I'm a grown woman with children, and you know, what are you doing with your life? So it's that beration, that berating tone. It's almost like it's trying to be a tough love to sort of kick you out of it, which can sometimes work. Then you say, that's it, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Maybe,
And
yeah.
then by Wednesday, I'm feeling great again.
It's almost like the sort of polarity, isn't it? That you know, you sort of this fading bias, and then suddenly you're like, no, I've got this, and off you go again. But well done for being able to look in the mirror. And I literally got to a point where I couldn't, because I had such a low opinion and such a sense of loss as well, I think, of the person I was looking at, you know, what I had been before, and that sense of, look at what you've become.
Tell us about that for people that don't know, for people that may not have come across you before. What was that?
Well, you know how some of your sort of defining characteristics are often the words that other people put to
Yeah.
you. So when I was younger, and I'm talking like sort of in my late teens, early 20s, probably mid 20s, people always said, you know, I had real sparkle and I had real drive and I had sass, I suppose. That would be the current. We didn't use the word sass then, but you know, that's what the youth of today would say now. And I just felt like I had lost it. And over many years of drinking and that constant beration, those powerful, powerful words of sort of self-recrimination, it just chipped and chipped and chipped away at me. And you know, my confidence had tanked because I couldn't fulfill basic commitments to myself. Now, all of this is in the context of the fact that I was, you know, working in a senior position in an advertising agency, and through the decades of my drinking, I've been sort of climbing through the ranks. I was, for all intents and purposes, successful in my professional capacity, but I was kind of dying inside. And the only way that I really describe that is this sense, Helen, of like having a sort of a dimmer switch that was just being, you know, nudged and nudged and nudged off, and my light was going out, because my confidence, you know, all the things that you need really to be tenacious and sassy and driven and ambitious. You have to have goals, you have to have dreams, you have to have a sense that you can achieve them. So agency in your own
Mm.
right. You've got to have energy. You've got to have an undeterring sense of kind of focus and I can do ability. And as you'll probably relate to, what happens instead is you got bugger all energy. In fact, you're exhausted. Your ambitions begin to sort of dim as the light goes out, not least of all because your world closes down
Yes.
and your horizons become shorter, because you're not thinking next year I could do this and in 5 years time and my 10-year plan. All you're really thinking about is I feel really shit, and come 6 o'clock this evening, that was my horizon. Maybe be able to feel a little bit less rubbish if I just have a glass of wine or some such. So, and then I'd be quite grateful if I'd got through the weekend without completely, you know, doing myself physical harm by stumbling around and stuff. So my goals and my ambitions and what I kind of considered to be success metrics had somewhat changed, let's say. And even if they hadn't, I would not have had, you know, the energy to do that, to pursue them. So, I mean, jumping well ahead to a point when I gave up alcohol, the greatest delight for me was that I realized it was all still there, you know, but I hadn't, you know, the dimmer kind of got switched back up very, very quickly. And I realized that what was inherently me was still there.
Yes.
I've been doing a really good job at both talking and therefore drinking my way out of that self belief. Um, so, you know, I often say that, I mean, I'm 54 now, and I feel the same amount of drive and sort of verve and tenacity that I've probably last felt when I was about 28. And it's game back on, which is
Love.
wonderful because I've got time to do stuff with it.
Yes.
And it's very
Yes.
exciting, and it's, you know, it makes me feel very, very positive. Indeed. But that's, that's when I was looking in this, back to your original question, when I was looking in the mirror or trying to avoid my reflection in the mirror, it was because I knew, I knew exactly, with a sort of heart sinking sense of doom, exactly what was going on and what I was becoming and what I was losing. I just didn't know how to do anything about it at the time.
No. And you mentioned that revelation, that epiphany, that realization that actually alcohol didn't add to your personality. It didn't make you a better person. What you were before the alcohol was perfect and wonderful and amazing. And that actually, even though it kind of twists with your mind, thinking it does provide maybe a bit of confidence or a relaxation or an easier sense of being and moving through the world, it's an illusion, because that light dims, but as you say, it's almost like it goes back on again at an alarming rate.
Yeah, it does. For me, it's the greatest joy, I think, of having given up drinking is that, as well as having that sort of sense of ambition back, I've got my kind of growth mindset.
Yes, that's
Which
it.
I know it's a really sort of overused term, but my new addiction is learning about stuff again, and myself, for sure, learning about myself, but just thinking to myself, if now that you've been able to overcome this and you have that level of self-belief, what else can you do?
And you hear how that voice is different.
Mm.
Hear how that self-talk is encouraging.
It's the polar opposite. It's the absolute flip side. And I think that was a massive shock to me, because when it's obviously the power of words. As soon as you start becoming your own cheerleader and your own advocate, your own, if you can change that inner critic into an inner mentor, if you can start talking to yourself with a greater degree of compassion and encouragement, and start urging yourself to see the opportunity in everything, and the possibilities that lie ahead. As soon as you can start doing that, those words are everything. It literally, it's a mindset shift.
It is.
I mean, I know I'm preaching to the converted, obviously, but I have never ever ceased to be amazed by the simple power of the narrative that we tell ourselves. The fact that we take this language for granted and we just spout it off, day in, day out. But a good copywriter, for example, in an ad agency, or someone who writes speeches, knows the absolute power that this word versus that word, this inflection versus that inflection, presented in this way or that way, has entirely different meaning. And sometimes it's just the smallest of words that can make all the difference.
And that's really, when we think about this narrative and we zoom out and we think, yeah, okay, we've got this internal narrative through years and years and years and years and years of sort of ingrained behavior. But then let's look at what's the narrative in our society, in the ad agencies and the marketing agencies and the culture that's reinforced, still is being reinforced, and that is the norm in terms of how we socialize that narrative. Because I know that you've got, the sort of, a viewpoint on ads. So tell us about that.
I was an ad man. I was an ad person. I found it quite amusing the other day when somebody sort of referred to me as poacher turned gamekeeper.
Love.
I know. So did I. I laughed for a very long time, and then I thought, "Ooh, should I apologise?" And actually, I do regret. I do regret the time that I ever spent sort of working on ad campaigns for alcohol drinks, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I finished working in the ad industry only last year. I was still very, very active. I was the strategy director for an advertising agency, and very, very much responsible for making sure that, for the brands that we marketed, there were sort of strong advertising, creative strategies in place, etc. It's all about stories. It's all about the storytelling. Now, in recent years, I refused to work on advertising accounts, and I pointed my energies towards. I was able to cherry pick. I mean, I led the team, so I was able to cherry pick what I worked on. But in my youth, I worked on advertising for alcohol, and of course, I loved it because I was up to my ears in the world of alcohol outside of work. So to be able to indulge in it and the romance of it inside work as well was great. It's game on. So I'm very close to advertising. I'm very close and reflective about the power of advertising. And if any listener is in any doubt, if they feel they are impervious, I'm sorry, it's not true. It is everywhere. And, as you were alluding to a moment ago, in addition to the stories we tell ourselves, we are surrounded by them. In this country, in this part of the world, and for that I mean largely the Western world, alcohol-centric societies, advertising stories have a huge impact on our view of alcohol. It romanticizes it.
Yes.
It glamorizes it. It aligns it with success and sexiness, of confidence and
Luxury.
clarity and luxury and, performance and you name it. It absolutely, any positive association, wisdom, think of all the whiskey ads, wisdom, journeys, stories, rebellion, or the vodka. Rebellion is kind of where that sort of brand and style of drink tends to sit. The big sort of wine o'clock and mummy culture around pink drinks
Yes.
and
Pink gin, pink fizz.
you deserve it, all that sort of stuff. Stories, words, just words. It is a bottle of ethanol and of other dilutants and a bit of taste and a bit of color, and around the whole thing is wrapped a story that presents it to you as something you need. You need this in your life, whether it's to relax or to be sociable, to be courageous or to be confident or whatever it is, to bond, to sort of connect and belong. You need it, you need it, you need it, you need it. And no one is impervious to that.
No.
People obviously do choose their own way and they decide not to drink, but you're still swimming against the strong current that is telling you that you do, because that's what we all do. So yeah, very powerful.
You talk there in such a beautiful way, in such a articulate and eloquent way of telling this story of the stories that are being told to us. And from my viewpoint now, and I do realise, I'm at a particular place in my journey where I'm able to reflect back. And I know that, further back along the journey, I wasn't able to do this. So, for anyone listening thinking, oh, it's all right for you, I totally get it. But I look at that now and I think, God, I was so hoodwinked.
Well, I wouldn't beat yourself up.
Well, it's
Honestly.
such an illusion. It is an illusion.
Oh, it's a complete illusion. It's the word is artifice. It is absolute BS. But the point is that, look, come on. I mean, I spent 25 years in advertising, plus 25 plus years. I helped craft those messages and narratives, the glamorized drinking. And I fell for them.
You were the one that was creating it with the psychology, the understanding of the psychology.
When I stepped back, I realized that I wasn't just sort of quitting a habit, a personal habit. I was kind of unpicking an entire cultural belief system.
Yes.
And that belief system is born of a huge amount of conditioning. And yes, it can come from your home and the things that you hear, the words again, and the actions, obviously, of your parents and those around you, for sure. Society as a whole, through which, advertising has such a massive amount of traction. And if anyone's in any doubt about that, the alcohol industry globally spends trillions of dollars every year. In the UK, it's eye-watering as well. It's in billions. And they wouldn't do it if it didn't work.
I know.
They get an ROI. I think it's roughly, for every pound that they might spend, so they might be spending sort of £3 million on an advertising campaign that goes through TV and social media and whatever it is, for every pound that they're spending, they will be looking for £5 or £6 back in terms of revenue. So that's their return on their investment through the sales of the drinks. It works. And they would not be spending that amount of money if they weren't making those multiples in return.
Yeah, of course. It all comes down to money. It comes down to money.
And the power of storytelling,
Yes.
because, you know, when we think about the intrinsic product, which, as I said, you know, sort of in a slightly glib way, you know, the ethanol, the flavouring, the, you know, the aromatics and all that sort of stuff. No one ever talks about that. No one ever talks about what goes into a bottle of champagne, or, you know, what goes into a bottle of vodka. Potatoes fermented. Give me a break.
Wouldn't be a very good story, would
Oh,
it?
great. But what they will talk about in the creation of a brand is the story around it. You know, the sort of entirely successful and glamorous people who drink that particular bottle of champagne, the people who've got life nailed. And if you drink this, you will also have life nailed. You'll know how to live. You'll be up there with the best of them, sort of thing. Or, you know, the vodka culture of, you know, convincing you that a certain brand stands for a certain demographic,
Yes.
and, you know, a certain lifestyle of zigging when others are zagging and all that sort of stuff. Oh, it's all very exciting. Drink this brand, and it's, you know, and that's what it is. And we fall for it. Everybody does. Everybody does.
So at the moment, we're talking about this, and it does sound pretty bleak, right? Because first of all, we've got this individual lived experience
Mm.
out of a culture that's, you know, that's already designed with alcohol in mind, and we have this Gollum effect, self-talk, storytelling, and then we look out, and then we see that everywhere else, that it's reaffirming that alcohol is a good thing rather than a bad thing. So if there is any inkling inside us that we know there's something not right, it doesn't feel right, it's not having the effect we want it to, how do we challenge this?
Ah, well, herein lies a really big question. It's you make a very good point. Just to begin with, let me say that, you know, you don't have to be on your knees, you know, exhausted, broken, rock bottom sort of stuff to decide that you want to look at your alcohol intake, or that you want to simply get curious. And I think that curiosity is the key. I think that opens all the doors. The sort of self-inquiry can't really start unless you start kind of going, what's going on? The way I describe it, and the way I always sort of, one of the things I always say to people is, you know, your life doesn't have to necessarily be really bad. You could just be saying, is my life good enough? Right? Is it good enough? Am I actually really okay? But I could be great. Is it the thing that's stopping you going from kind of good to great? And for some people, it is a thing that's actually bringing them well below par, obviously. But just it's that honest question, am I comfortable? Am I comfortable with my drinking? Because if in any shape or form you're not, if there's a little nagging doubt, oh, I wish I could drink that. Can't, because all my friends drink. You know, listen to yourself, okay? Because straight away, otherwise, you're sort of you're being led. You're being led again by the narrative of friends and the behaviour of friends in that particular case. So I'd always, you know, start off with some really good sort of self-inquiry about, you know, is alcohol, am I always only drinking to make myself happy? Is happiness always the outcome? Or am I sometimes not happy when I drink and I'm doubting whether I should be drinking, or I'm drinking a bit too much? And just start asking yourself those honest questions without judgment, by the way.
Yes.
And that's the important thing, because that language of judgment can take you straight back into denial, or wanting to defend yourself almost against your own judgment. But
Yes.
yeah, do you see what I mean? It can sort of go, oh, I need to kick it down the road, because that's one of those uncomfortable thoughts.
Yes.
But definitely that sort of process of inquiry. And when it comes to things, whenever I start working with people who want to get curious about their alcohol, I would always encourage that they don't stop drinking straight away, which is really interesting, really, because people, what, really? You don't mind me drinking? I said, well, you do drink. So you drink for a reason. Let's explore why. And the stories you're telling yourself. So when you come home of an evening and it's 6 o'clock and you're gagging for a drink, what job are you asking it to do? What belief have you fallen for that you think, what do you think it's going to do for you? And then just get really curious about it. Have that drink and then check back in. And has it de-stressed you in the way that you wanted it to? Has it, addressed your anger and resentment from the day in the way that you wanted it to? But don't start taking the messages that we're given around alcohol for face value anymore.
It is a rewiring, really,
It is a rewiring.
through first, open, curious, non-judgmental dialogue with yourself, but then also, and I think this is really important, is a stigma-free conversation without fear or shame with other people.
Definitely.
So someone like yourself, where you're holding a private, safe environment for someone to explore those types of feelings without shame or judgment is fantastic. But there's also that step of being able to talk about it without fear or shame. And for me, I was not there at all when I was drinking. I didn't want to talk about it to anybody. God, no.
No.
But since sort of declaring it publicly, which I did for accountability, and now people are saying, I'm 100 days. Thank you so much. I'm 3 weeks. Another DM the other day, just saying, oh, I really need to look at this, and just these sorts of messages that I'm getting, where I'm then being really open about things, and these people are just feeling open to share back because I'm being open. So it's kind of like, if you feel okay to share, then I'm going to feel okay to share, because there's no judgment here.
Yeah. So at risk of plugging my own podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I created the Big Drink Rethink, it was to provide that sort of food for thought and nudge people towards the questions that they can be asking themselves, but obviously to do it in a way which, as podcasts are quite sort of one-to-one, aren't they? You're listening to it when you're walking a dog or so I wanted there to be a sense of you can have and be part of a conversation without having to initiate it. You can dial into the conversation around alcohol and appreciate, because it's the Big Drink Rethink, that lots of other people are doing it too.
Yeah.
So, the podcast started just over a year ago. It's got about 120,000 people listening to it. And every single one of those people is probably sitting at home, or was probably sitting at home, battling with themselves, thinking, is it just me? Is it just me? And, albeit only once a week, I can put an episode out there and talk about the things that I know people are asking.
Yes.
And that it is not just you. And you can take confidence from that. Now, that automatically doesn't mean you're going to start spouting it from the rooftops that you think you've got, challenges with your drinking or anything like that. But it can start to chip away at this sense of solitude. And this sense of sort of personal failing, and I always say this to Helen, Helen as well, that, everybody is prone to addiction. Everybody, alcohol is addictive to all human beings. It is the way that it works physiologically. We're all the same species. It works the same way with everybody. I think the real differences that occur is, the manner in which you drink it. So I was drinking it entirely to manage my emotions, and that got me into trouble because I stopped feeling my emotions. I suppressed all my emotions, and then I became scared of my emotions because I lost touch and got out of practice, if I was ever even in practice of dealing with them, which meant more drink got poured on top in order to keep them in check and keep them in place.
Yes.
And then as I grew older and I hit more emotional stages in life, I was a complete mess.
Yeah.
Because I had no other tools. So I
Right.
learned more and more. So first of all, there's a world of not just mine, but other podcasts that people can tap in and listen to. And there's some great books out there as well, which you can read one-to-one and sort of begin to realize that stigma that you feel isn't just you. It's not really deserved. I mean, there's a sort of a social thing going on out there. You don't want to sort of necessarily declare your issues but you can take solace from that. The other thing you can do is start journaling. And I know people start rolling their eyes going, oh my God, that sounds like a lot of work. But silence breeds shame. And if you don't quite feel you've got the sort of the wherewithal yet to talk about it to other people, you can still get it out of your head by putting your thoughts down on a page. And that's really, really powerful. Really, really powerful, because it's almost like that emotional release.
Yes.
That can just take the pressure out of the pressure cooker that is your head and will have you wanting another drink if it stays in there. So that's really important. But the stigma that exists at a societal level around alcohol is so chuffing unjust. It really is, from a society that pushes it constantly, through the means that we've just talked about, the advertising and, the social etiquette, pushing it all the time, suddenly points a finger, and attributes words like alcoholic.
Yes.
When it all goes wrong. And I'm just like, my personal view on that is, how dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you label the personal label? Again, the
Blame.
power of words, the personal label, which can keep us stuck, because that one word carries so much power. It kept me stuck for years. Fear, of the association
Yeah.
around that.
Because if you admit that there is a problem, then that must mean you're an alcoholic.
We have no other word for it. We have this really black and white view. So whilst we're here on a podcast talking about the power of words, come on, people, let's create a new one, because one that actually helps people see that the world is not that black and white.
No.
And that is the problem that we've had, that sense that you're either one of those people who can be the life and soul of the party and keep it all in check, which makes you normal, or you're the one who just goes a little bit too far, and probably, imagery of, guzzling at home in the airing cupboard and stuff like that, which means that you're an alcoholic, one of them, and straight away, shame again, so it's so unhelpful, so unhelpful.
So for anyone who's listening to this and thinking, do you know what? Gosh, this does really resonate, but I don't have any labeling. I don't have any communication strategies to change my drink habits and communicate that to those who I need to support me. Or how do I communicate this in a way that doesn't declare me as an alcoholic?
Do you mean in terms of talking to other people about it?
Yeah, because I think for me that, there was the internal, there was the curiosity, there was the reading of the books and listening to the podcast. And please do listen to Anna's podcast. We'll link it in the show notes because it is fantastic. And the topics covered are just, all angles of this discussion, which is really important. But for me, it was that step from the shame to the curiosity to then sharing that, to then making that open. And I know that's a tricky step for a lot of people.
But it's a really tricky step. There was a hurdle to overcome, and I know so well. I can, oh my God, even talking about it now, I'm kind of going back to the time where I would sort of stand in front of the mirror and practice saying what I needed to say, which was, and in my mind at the time, and this is not what I'm advocating to people, therefore, in my mind at the time, I have a drinking problem. Do you know what I mean? I was like, makes me feel sick thinking about it. I have a drinking problem. This is what I was going to, this is in my mind, this is what I was going to walk into the doctor and say, or my husband. I couldn't say it. So I wouldn't start there, because straight away, you're trying to verbalize the intensely painful.
Yeah.
Which is always going to be hard. So I would really, I would say, explore the language which allows for your own personal curiosity. So looking back, I could have said to my husband, I'm going to experiment with not drinking for a bit. but I might need some help with that. Now, he might then turn around and gone, why, what's going on? And I would have just said, because I don't think it's serving me.
That's for me, that's been I use that one a lot.
And by the way, he would have been the first to agree. It'd have gone, yes, hallelujah. So that would have then, it would have taken the heaviness out of it, and it would have turned instantly into a conversation of, I hear you, I probably agree. And then I would have probably, and not immediately, but over the coming days, been able to possibly reveal a little bit more about myself, because it's by degrees, I think, is a really useful rule of thumb. You don't have to come out with a declaration. You can come out with some statements of intent.
Yes. You don't have to tell a story.
No. Sometimes you'll never tell your whole story. There are things that I know, truths that I know from my drinking days that my husband doesn't, and he doesn't ever need to. He doesn't have to worry about me in that regard anymore, so I don't feel that I need to go back and, rake through the shit, as it were. But that's fine, because I am the judge of what I tell people. And I was always the judge when I was coming through my own sort of process of quitting alcohol. It was almost like a drip feed of information that only happened when I was comfortable.
Yes.
I think I might experiment with not drinking for a while with an immediate sense of levity, but God knows I think I'm going to find that quite hard. I don't think it's serving me. I don't think it's making me happy anymore. That's all you need to possibly say to open the door to the possibility.
Yeah. It's something I do get asked a lot now. Why did you stop? People are always curious because of their own connection with their own drinking. And, something that I've been saying lately is, it wasn't adding anything to my life. Yeah. So it's similar to it wasn't serving me anymore. And also the relationship with.
Yeah.
So rather than saying I have a drinking problem, it's I have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the sort of the degree of vulnerability grows, your sort of bravery grows over time, for sure. But sometimes when I first stopped, people would say to me, why have you quit? I'd be really like, I don't know, I have. I'm just not drinking at the moment.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's a good one.
And they'd be like, whatever. I said, I don't know. Didn't you hear what I just said? At the moment? But I've got to say, I'm feeling a lot better. So it's raising a lot of questions for me. And, that sense of, I always would suggest as well, you keep it in the realms of your own feelings, because people can't argue with that.
No, they can't.
Why have you quit? Because it wasn't making me happy.
Okay.
All right. Well, are you happier now? Oh, yeah, I feel a lot happier now, and I feel more relaxed, and I feel calm, and I feel this, and I feel that. No one can argue with how you personally feel as a result of anything. And so that tends to sort of put it to bed. And if people are ever kind of forward enough to kind of go, did you have a problem with it? I would now say, looking back, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because I carried on doing it for longer than I should have done in ways that I shouldn't have done. But that's all in the past.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But as going back to the power of words, and that sort of one of the most powerful things that you can affix to any sort of sentence at all around this is that little word yet. So you kind of say that you're not drinking, I'm not sure yet. Keeps it open, keeps it full of possibility.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I want to give up yet. But I'm going to experiment and find out, and it's what suddenly becomes a sort of what was a closed thing. So I used to do this all the time, Helen. I'm not strong enough to do this. I'm not strong enough yet. I don't know how to do this. Or I don't know how to do this yet. Yet. And it's just tiny little thing.
But it holds so much power.
And it opens up an option.
Yeah, it does.
Possibility that was never there before. So I know it's so hard. We're asked to engage and find mindfulness in so many things these days, but if you can listen to the words that you're saying to yourself, and the stories that you're telling yourself, and question whether they're your beliefs, and whether they were inherited or where they've come from, and whether they're actually serving you, It's a really good place to start.
It's a fantastic place to start. Anna, I love talking to you. You know, it's been an honour to be a guest on your amazing podcast, and now to have you,
bless you,
talking on my podcast is, you know, I love the way you use your words. And
I can't come onto a podcast like this and talk like a goon, can I? What you're doing, you imposter. No, that's very kind of you. I've loved this conversation.
But I always end the candid conversations, by asking one last question, and that is, what words have changed your life? Yet,
literally. That is probably fundamentally. I would say the individual word would be yet, and because I apply that to everything. I don't know how to build a website. Don't know how to build a website yet.
I love that. It's
everything
so cool.
I'm no good at IT. I'm no good at IT yet. You know, so that or I've never run a marathon. Not run a marathon yet. Actually,
I'm not sure if I would put yet on.
Actually, we can put a full stop at the end of that one. Never happening. But no, so yet would be the word. But I think often for me, as well as importantly as the words, it's the tone.
Yeah.
Talk to yourself like you're talking to your best mate, you know, and consider whether you would ever level the criticism that you level at yourself to someone who you love, and, you know, temper your tone with that simple principle in mind, and it will be transformative.
That's and just to add to that, for me, it may sound a bit weird, but because I found this really hard in the beginning, I did it whilst giving myself a hug.
Absolutely.
And absolutely. I don't do that anymore, but at the beginning I was like, right, what do you need?
What do you need right now?
What do you need? And then that enabled me to be a lot kinder.
100%.
So, yeah.
With you on that.
Thank you so much, Anna. As I say, we'll link in the show notes. Please go check out Anna's podcast. And if you are curious about all of the things that Anna does in this area, do reach out to her. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you.